we had a joke of an election. Literally, it turned on who would, who would be able to best respond to trolling that stemmed from the American president having an extremely bad relationship and low view of Justin Trudeau. And our election just spun off into like crazy land based on, and who does that happen to except for a state that's kind of got banana republic, politics going on. And so, yeah, when you say we're bigger stuff could be on the horizon, yeah, that wobbliness is there. I agree.
Sam Cooper, my brother, we are back in action post-election. Both of us probably still feeling the exhaustion of the last few months. How you doing, man?
Yeah, no, you're right there. It was a real reporting mission, and it's kind of it was rewarding for me because this is the first time, really. I always loved reporting on elections when I was working for newspapers. It was always a fun night. Everyone had pizza, and then you get down to it, and then go out for beers after. And now I'm working for myself, and so it was like 40 days all out or something like that, and just breaking stories and no time to breathe. And then the election night happens, and we had talked about what's going to happen. I think both of us had a good sense of what happened. And indeed, it was the thoughts in my mind are surreal to live through basically a banana republic gaslighting election. And that's what happened, right?
You nailed it. That banana republic gaslighting election is the perfect way to explain it. So now that we are where we are in the aftermath, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it went the way I thought it would based on the last week of the campaign. As we said in our election special, the Conservatives, I said, we're in an era where they're going to likely win the popular vote, but they will have to run the table to become a minority government. And they did very well. In the circumstances, they gained seats. But, you memorably set me up and said Donald Trump gave an alley-oop to Mark Carney. And I said, yeah, an unintended alley-oop. That's what happened. And I think we both had been saying, probably a few times prior to the election in podcast tapes that it's incredible to watch how, a segment of the population is being gaslit and being gaslit hard.
Yeah.
TrueAnon was always going to vote for Carney, right? There's whatever it is, 25% hardcore liberal voters, some of them social justice warriors, some of them just people that do not care about corruption. All they care about is their team and power. And so they were always going to vote for Carney. And that under the table baton pass that just worked so well. But there were people, that should have to look at themselves in the mirror and say, I bought the narrative that Mark Carney was going to be elbows up and fighting for Canada. And that narrative, that dream was shattered for those people. A few days after Carney wins, he goes down to the White House and it's, meek. And I think it's interesting because remember Donald Trump once called Justin Trudeau kind of meek and humble after Trudeau. This is interesting. I'm rambling a bit here, but remember Trudeau had a meeting with Trump and then they came out and said something kind of aggressive in a press conference and Trump went ballistic in Air Force One. Right. They're like, this guy was like a kitty cat in the meeting and now he's playing tough guy afterwards. Yeah. Homie, don't play that. And so Trump went off on, and it's the same thing, right? Carney has the same people around him and, Gerald Butts, Katie Telford, Tom Pitfield, gaslighting Canadians to the hilt that Carney's going to be the tough guy. And that's what happened in the election. We even heard beforehand that the news leaked, I guess, strategically, that Carney had his talk with Trump and said, you're a transformational president. I look forward to working with you. It's going to get a little rough because I'm going to be hitting you hard. I'm going to be like slamming you. And I guess, as much as I followed all that garbage, I mean, I guess Trump probably said, yeah, I understand. And so now we see it. Carney wins, the liberals are back in power, nothing has changed, and he goes down to Washington, and they'll act tough as they did before and after, but they're going to fold, and they have folded, because as you and I have said, you can't overplay a weak hand, and the hand has been weakened by successive liberal governments, not only, but mostly.
Dude, you said it perfectly, because I watched that entire press conference, and I'm sitting there thinking, this is bad. This is really bad, because he, like, Carney, see, look here, I'll give him a little bit of respect here, because he does position himself and posture like a statesman. Yeah, he appears to be more of a statesman than Trudeau ever was.
Oh yeah,
Trudeau just always had this deer in headlights, goofy theater kid thing going that he just didn't fit, right?
Exactly. No other serious world leaders took him seriously, and yet we had a large segment of Canada that bought the same people that are still in love with Pierre Trudeau, and younger people that got hoodwinked. A lot of them not hoodwinked anymore, but they thought that this guy was a respected world leader, because he wore a suit well, and I guess the colorful socks worked for a week or two on people. But yeah, I agree. It's interesting that even though I think Carney is bought and paid for by China essentially, and we're in for a downward spiral, unless he throws his party and backers under the bus, and he seems to be devious enough to maybe have something like that up his sleeves. Maybe he's enough of an Anglophile, he appreciates the king and the Western Intelligence Alliance enough to do something to surprise me, but I don't think he will. I think, as I and others have said, it's going to be downhill fast with China again. But, at that meeting, any honest person would look at that and say he played his hand about as well as he could, and probably much like people that voted for Pierre Poilievre would have expected him to play it. You can't go down in the lion's den and pull a Zelensky. It's not going to work well, right? You have to be a statesman. You have to take your licks. Let's be honest. Who's the power there? So I mean, just looking at it, straight up the middle, he went down and he did a fairly good job for what he had in his hand.
The thing that really struck me in watching that press conference was just the continued efforts to placate Trump's ego. And then when the talk of the 51st state comes up, he's kind of meekly says, well, Canada's never for sale. And it's like, all right, dude, like I'm imagining Pierre Poilievre in that seat, in that position. I imagine he would have been a little more rough around the edges, slightly more combative in a political way. A little well behaved, but a little more edgy. And I just felt like with Mark Carney, here he is, the central banker in action. And I agree with you. I think that I don't think he's devious enough or courageous enough to go against his backers and the people who are really running the show. I think what we're doing is, or what he's doing at this period in time is, we're being set up for the kill shot. That's the way that I feel. I feel like this is all a setup.
Yeah, I mean, if he would have to get out of the channel that the Liberal Party has set for 40 years.
Yeah.
He would have to throw the more wealthy and powerful people that are behind him and have billions of dollars tied up in China. He would have to throw them under the bus. And I don't think he can do that. Even as smart, very obviously, he's a statesman, and he's improved in the weeks that we've seen him in action, right?
Weeks.
Yeah, he's now an all grown-up politician and statesman. But you can see that Trump, there's a level of probably respect there, certainly in comparison to Trudeau, which was a pure joke. I mean, and so, yeah, I do agree. There's all kinds of channels and I'm trying to sort this out in my mind, where we go to from here. But the baseline is, he keeps doing what liberal politicians do, liberal leaders, which is, sort of act like they're Western leaders, but really they're in the bag for China. and they'll talk the talk with Trump. They'll talk the talk with the Canadian public. They'll be lying to everyone on all sides.
Yeah.
And we keep going down. That's the baseline scenario. And as I say, if Carney has the moral fiber in him that comes from his supposed religious beliefs and being through the storms of being a central banker in two countries, and the intelligence that we both know he has, he'll go deep within himself and do something very statesman. He would have to become probably the greatest prime minister ever if he pulled off what I would do in his seat, which is, basically, we're like this with the United States, Britain, and Taiwan, Japan. There's a war coming, and it's time for some tough and real talk to Canadians. This is how compromised we were. These are people within my party that I want to see in jail. It's never going to happen, but a real leader, this is what they'd have to do, I believe.
Agreed. And, I'm watching that press conference and I'm seeing the usual suspects sitting on the couch on the Canadian side. And I'm just seeing the same handlers.
Yeah.
Right.
Melanie.
Yeah.
She didn't have her equestrian outfit on for that, I don't think. But McGuinty, the erstwhile former head of NSI Cop that, apparently now whatever he learned in NSI Cop, he can't use anymore, that he's the public safety minister. He's got to promote the lie that Canada doesn't have a big fentanyl problem. And Dominic LeBlanc, what can you say?
Right. And so it's like it's the same group. And look, I don't want to lean too conspiratorial here, but it does seem to me like these people are the handlers. Like these people are the ones who are handing him his talking points and saying, listen, this is what Beijing is telling us, and we need to kind of tread carefully on this issue or that issue, or, they're basically there to watch to make sure he doesn't step out of line. Now, go ahead, Sam.
Certainly Dominic LeBlanc knows where the bones are buried, and probably a lot of them in his own backyard. He knows the history of Trudeau. If they're as smart and if they even care about Five Eyes intelligence, they know what Trump and others know about Trudeau. They know what they know about themselves. They know what the CIA knows about Carney. And so, yeah, they would be there again, passing the baton. And, again, there's a lot of analysis going on in my mind of where we go to from here. But I have a pretty good idea of what the Americans know about the compromises surrounding those handlers, let's call them that. Gerald Butt swapped out for Tom Pitfield. It's just like they couldn't run the same chief secretary, so they run basically his, I don't know, pretty much twin. And yeah, it's the same team.
It is, and that's, you see, I'm in the same place as you. I'm still processing all of this, right? And look, I will say this: if I was a less intelligent person, I would be very easily lulled by the way Mark Carney postures. Right? Yeah. Because he feels like a statesman. He feels like a prime minister. He feels like an establishment guy, clear-eyed leader who has a very, clear picture of the future in his mind. He has a vision, and he's pursuing it. But knowing what we know, mostly through my conversations with you and Michelle Sterling and Andy Lee and others, he's duplicitous. And I think that duplicity is you see with Trudeau, and we'll get off this subject here in a second, but with Trudeau, the benefit to him is that he had a childlike demeanor and understanding of the world, right?
Yeah.
So all of the really disgusting, evil things that he did, he was always very transparent. You could read him like a book, right? Because there's nothing hidden there. There's just nothing going on in his head. So everything he does, the playbook is kind of laid out there for anybody paying attention. Whereas with Mark Carney, he's a totally different animal. And so you can watch him on TV or at that press conference with Trump and feel, yeah, I feel comfortable with this guy being there. He's confident. He's, he's attentive. He's adding in comments and he's adding substance to the conversation in the press conference. But, knowing what we know, it all has purpose. And I don't think that purpose is beneficial to the Canadian people, right?
Yeah, no, that's good analysis. Like Justin Trudeau is and was an actor, right? He was a vessel for whatever these smarter handlers around him, compromised or not, and most of them compromised what they're telling him to do.
Right.
He's like a rapper that doesn't write his own lyrics but recites them well. Right?
He's Drake.
He's Drake.
Yeah.
So that was him. So if he's in that spot, like you're right, he's a baby in the woods. Like if Trump goes this way, there's little he can do. Carney he's an actor. He's a writer.
Yeah.
He's not an actor like he's not a Hollywood actor. He is an actor in world affairs, right?
Yeah.
So he can think on his feet. And that's why you're right. You come away from that. And I saw business people that were kind of before the election, like Carney is going to take us downhill fast. And they were right. And they're still right. But they watched that, like everyone that's pretty, open-minded, like, wow, I came out of that not feeling that Canada, is going to be the 51st state. He's going to find a way to kind of finagle us through this.
Yeah.
And there was a collective sigh of relief. And the people that have no shame that voted for this guy, believing that he was going to go in through punching, he's even won them over, right? They don't care anymore. They're like, yeah, he came out of that pretty good.
Yeah, and I think that, with all this 51st state talk, at this point in time, with Carney as our prime minister, we have a stronger likeliness of being a Chinese province over an American state.
Yeah, that's the track that is set. And it would, like I say, I mean, I always like to give people a chance to do the best thing. And so I'd like to see that, but I don't believe it will happen. But we'll leave that option open, or that possibility open.
Yeah, well, I had the luxury of having a conversation. I want to be careful with how I word this because he made it clear to me that he could not be identified on my silly podcast. That's what he said. Those were his words.
Thanks.
A very authoritative member of the Canadian Armed Forces. Mm-hmm. I had a conversation with.
Yeah.
And he was very adamant about, he basically equated Canada to being a satellite intelligence base for the CCP.
Yeah. I mean, this is what I've been saying. This is what I saw with my own eyes, cutting my teeth in Vancouver. This is what I know better, reporting from Ottawa and seeing that Toronto is a very, very important North American attack point for Chinese organized crime, Chinese intelligence. Every agency of China is set up strong and deep in Toronto. Same in Vancouver in different ways. And people that know call Vancouver especially, maybe because it's a little bit more apparent, a forward operational hub for Chinese intelligence, working with Iranian state actors, working with Mexican cartels, because in this crazy world we're living in, Latin American elite organized crime works together, in things like encryption technology and, Western Hemisphere money laundering, which is used in Chinese state activity. So Vancouver, absolutely an attack hub, and it's people that know in Canadian law enforcement, intelligence, and military. You're right, and in the United States at a very senior level. That's how they see it.
And, just to cap this off, because we have a lot to cover today, so we'll cap this off here. But, I'm watching that press conference with Trump and Carney, and I see the way Trump, he has a very strange way of articulating his actual thoughts, right? So they're talking about the 51st state thing, and he keeps going, well, never say never, never say never, never say never. And I feel like what he's indicating there is, look, this is for the cameras, but there are things happening that the world is not aware of that we are going to have to address. And he's not confident that the Canadian government is going to address them without force, right?
Yeah, and I mean, just riffing off that, Carney did play that well. I mean, give him credit. He was like, never, never to the crowd, right? He was playing it up, and he played well with it. But you're
Yeah.
right. It's like when Trump says something like, we're going to sell F-35s to people, but we may have to have a kill button on them if they're not with us. This is the type of thing that
Yeah.
it sounds like a joke, but he's not joking, just like they're not joking about Greenland,
Yeah.
right? We may have to take that by force.
Yeah.
Everyone's like crazy. In my mind, it's crazy. But of course, if we go kinetic, who do you think? It's a race for that piece of land, right?
Yes.
Between
Yes.
China and the United States. And so this is what's in play now. If we go kinetic and, a third of our parliament is working for the bad guys, what's going to happen? Never say never.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the same. You could draw a parallel to, say, like World War II after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. I mean, the United States had to move into the Pacific, the South Pacific, onto all of the islands to cover ground. Right. It was a race between Japan and the United States to get personnel into those places as quickly as possible. Right. And
Yeah.
we're looking at a very similar situation with Greenland and Canada now.
Yeah.
While we're on the subject here of the election in China, you ran a story, I want to say a few days ago or maybe last week, that was really disturbing. Here in Canada, Conservative candidate Joe Tay, for people who are not familiar with the story, you can listen to my previous episode with Sam or go to thebureau.news and read his reporting because it's all there. So just to recap, Joe Tay, he's a Hong Kong. He was a broadcaster from Hong Kong, anti-Chinese Communist Party. He had a bounty put on him by the CCP. Liberal candidate Paul Chang had kind of signaled that, hey, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea if Joe Tay was delivered to China. Election happens. Joe Tay loses his riding. Surprise, surprise. And now his family are under threat in Hong Kong. Can you go into that story and tell us what's going on?
Yeah, I broke the story in recent days that even after the election, after Joe Tay was defeated, his cousin and the man's wife in Hong Kong were detained for questioning. These are credible reports from Hong Kong media. And so it's, just an incredible situation where, first of all, to have a Canadian politician running for parliament and under those threats, attacked by a rival politician. I mean, of course, I was the one that was driving this story and digging deep because I'm the one that has read documents that no one else has, where certain politicians or politician in Ontario promised the Communist Party that they would attack other politicians if called upon, right? This is from NSI COP 2019. So completely consistent that a Liberal Party politician would kind of be playing that role against China's enemy number one, Joe Tay. And it was lost on a lot of people, or everyone except for myself, that beside that comment from Paul Chiang that Joe Tay be turned over, joking, not joking, beforehand he said something that it would cause a great controversy if Joe Tay was elected to parliament while he's facing that Hong Kong Security Act charge. And that particular message was almost exactly what was disseminated through Chinese cyber operations and through WeChat channels. And this came out. Rather, the site task force showed that cyber message, and I'm the one that connected Paul Chiang's, comments and how they match that, right? And it's just showing the level of attack that's going on there. And so for his relatives now to face questioning is, again, completely consistent with other Hong Kong migrants, in other countries have had their relatives pulled in for questioning. And that's how Beijing turns the screws even farther on these dissidents that are facing transnational repression. And so I broke the story, and I'm waiting for our tape will run, a few days after I've broken this story, but I'm waiting for a response from CSIS to my questions about Jotay's relatives, and how, to me, it looks like this is an increased leveraging against Canada's Parliament, obviously, against Jotay, very obviously, and against Prime Minister Carney, who, remember, basically turned a blind eye to the comments from Paul Chiang, and didn't remove his candidate. His candidate stepped down in the dead of night after the RCMP had also, essentially been pressured by international NGOs to at least say they're reviewing the situation. So a lot going on there, but I am waiting for answers. I'm waiting for an answer from Prime Minister Carney and that Prime Minister's office, who we have said to start this discussion are essentially, there's been a little deck shuffling, but they're the same people for that were in place for Justin Trudeau, who very obviously turned their eye blindly to a lot of this similar activity in their party.
Well, I am patiently awaiting for Melanie Jolie to don her mail lady outfit and deliver you that response personally. So Jotay's family, I mean, these are obviously intimidation tactics. Detained in Hong Kong. Now, Hong Kong, obviously, their government and police acting on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. Do we know what the outcome of those interrogations were, what that detainment was? Are they still detained right now? Have they been released? Do we know where that is?
As of my breaking the story and our discussion, I'm still looking for details on whether they have been released from that interrogation and questioning or not. But I've reported on similar stories by, involving, for one, a brave young lady in Boston who's attending university in that area after having to leave Hong Kong. She testified about her case in Canada's Parliament, facing stalking and from one of these United Front proxy actors in the United States. And her parents were, I believe, they may have been charged themselves. I need to go back and check that for our next discussion. Yeah. But so the point is that, Jotay's relatives reportedly questioned, but we don't know if they themselves could face some thug state, right? Fake charges. They're all fake charges. But I want to add that, I also reported on intelligence that Jotay's campaign team had reported a potential stalking incident involving what could be a threat actor following a Jotay campaign team in Markham. Yeah. And I don't know the response from police or CSIS to those allegations, whether they've been substantiated or not. And I'll continue to looking for answers. But if true, if the campaign team were followed by agents in Markham, that would be consistent with another story I broke from the previous election and reported in this cycle, that another Conservative candidate in that same area of Markham reported to CSIS that they believed they were being tracked and surveilled. And so, all to say that the activity that is completely unacceptable, the intensity of election interference, cyber operations, as I report, ground operations continue. And we haven't heard anything from Prime Minister Mark Carney about that. And, my intelligence community sources in the United States, I think, indicate that these types of concerns would be, in the mind of people in White House, whether, Canada is just going to let this stuff continue.
And I think we will, for obvious reasons. And let's move into the next story, because this is there's a connection here. So you ran a story this morning, so we're dating this podcast episode, but I've been waiting for this one forever, Sam. I've been waiting for this one. I've been drawing lines in my head, the crazy guy, making connections through all of our conversations, and you did it. So you ran a story talking about how Canada's legalized marijuana has allowed for global narcotic, well, become a I don't know the word for it, but like just a hub for global narcotics, money laundering, and other activities. So, Sam, can you take us into that story? Give us the bird's eye view and what you found.
Yeah, I'm working on a series of stories revealing how everyone is rightly focused on fentanyl, and it's established that China is running fentanyl around the world.
Yeah.
It's essentially state activity using triads to deal this death into North America. But in my new series of investigations, I've learned that cannabis, that benign, non-harmful drug that's been legalized in Canada, for the past few decades, Chinese organized crime has taken over and pooled medical pot licenses, which were very prevalent in British Columbia for a long time. And they've essentially consolidated Canada's legal marijuana business. There's nothing legal about the way they're criminals owning, through fronts, these, the ability to grow marijuana, but that's what they're doing. And in a nutshell, this is what it is. So there are homes rented for short term around Vancouver, and these are used as brokerages for the collection of marijuana that's grown on acreages around in more rural areas of British Columbia. So these Chinese organized crime groups realized how lucrative this is, and they go to more areas where there's less scrutiny around the province, and just deliver weed from around Western Canada into these brokerage houses. Remember, they're short-term rentals, so they can be moved around. And people walk in, as my story said, with black garbage bags, and walk out with duffel bags. So there's people that are bidding for this marijuana that's being grown in Canada. They're collecting it in these brokerages houses, and they're giving cash out to the people that deliver the weed there. The weed is packaged and it's shipped to New York, Japan, around the world. So Canada is being used by Chinese organized crime to export weed that's really supposed to be, I suppose, used within Canada legally, but it's being produced and shipped illegally around the world. And the real key thing here is, this is not just triads. This is the United Front Work Department, these very same community groups that I'm saying are involved in the support of candidates that Beijing wants in Canada's parliaments and provincial legislatures, municipal councils, the very same, businessmen that are, and women that would own grocery stores, real estate developments. Under the table, they are directing at the high level ones are directing this brokerage system and international money laundering system. So this is Chinese state sponsored money laundering and narco activity. So in a nutshell, that's a big mouthful, but stunning. Like when I do these stories and I write them, I'm like, wow, this is going to blow people's minds, and it'll blow the right people's minds, people that get it and care, right?
Yeah.
Chinese state, and it's going to go further. I have more stories, more US sources, more Canadian stories, more mind blowers for people that care. Does Canada's supposed fentanyl czar care, or cross-border drug trafficking czar care? There's no indications I have that he does. But this is what's going on. Just like it's very global, but Canada is being used, and used easily, by Chinese state actors working together with what we call Sam Gore, which is a guy named Chilap Say, and various other people. I don't have to name them all, but these names are now known around the world. This is what they're doing in British Columbia, and they're doing it on the border. So there's all kinds of there's stories coming up, and there's stories that I've already written that I do think are being followed in Washington.
And just so people understand, especially our American listeners, and Sam, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but this marijuana that's being grown, these are legal grow operations, legal, legit. You can have them in Canada. You can grow a certain amount of marijuana per location. So we're talking growing legally on acreages, so acres of marijuana cut down, harvested, and then packaged for distribution around the globe.
Yeah, and the thing is, they're purportedly legal, but I've reported on Ontario as well, just like industrial scale acreages. And so, yeah, you may have a license for like 200 plants per summer, but these are just like stunning. Like people, you would have to go to the store and see the pictures of these military-sized Quonset huts.
Yeah.
And, you've got stories of neighbors going, we just heard the ATVs at night. And it's like, literally, it's illegal migrants from Vietnam and China working in like slave labor conditions. We don't even know how bad, I think there's probably lots of stories of human trafficking and abuse going on, but literally slave labor, massive acreages, massive overproduction. So yeah, a little bit of it is purportedly legal, and that's what's being used. It's legal now, but the worst organized crime in the world and the worst nation state-sponsored activity, obviously China, is using our system and using it easily.
Okay, so I want to put some puzzle pieces together here. Sam, I know we're pressed for time today, so if I ramble, just give me the wrap it up sign, and I'll make it quick. So through my conversations with you, conversations with your colleague Adam Zivo, who has been all over the Safe Supply story for years, here's the picture that I have. The puzzle pieces put together.
Yeah.
Justin Trudeau, through numbered companies, invests in a series of marijuana growers and distributors prior to becoming prime minister, or prior to legalizing cannabis.
This is a theory.
This is I will say factulation. Okay. A little bit of fact, a little bit of speculation, because there are people who have dug into this who know. Okay. But a little bit of speculation involved. So let's say speculating. To my theory, Justin Trudeau invests through numbered companies into a number of marijuana grow operations and distributors just prior to legalizing marijuana completely, because before we had medical marijuana in Canada.
Okay.
Marijuana is legalized. Obviously, his stock value goes through the roof, cashes out, that money goes somewhere else. Marijuana is now legal in Canada. Organized crime steps in, starts growing marijuana legally in Canada, perhaps even setting up numbered companies to legitimize the whole thing. They grow the marijuana. So they report that they have 6 lights when they really have 300, right? Those 6 lights, they distribute what they're committed to according to the law. And then the rest is packaged, sent around the world. Now, there's another step to this. Justin Trudeau and the Liberals decriminalize hard narcotics in Canada.
In 2018.
2018. So a safe supply program is created in Vancouver, and I believe that there's another safe supply program in Ontario. These safe supply programs, through those programs, dilaudid hydromorphone becomes a street drug that young people seek out because the fentanyl addicts. To make a long story short, fentanyl addicts are written prescriptions for hydromorphone. However, they don't want hydromorphone; they want fentanyl. They get their prescription. They sell the pills for about $1 a pill to kids, thus exacerbating the problem, taking a contained fire and turning it into an inferno, because now you are creating an entirely new generation of addicts. In the midst of this, the people who are importing and distributing fentanyl across our country and across our borders also happen to be the same people who are involved in these marijuana grow operations, also happen to be people who own legitimate businesses, numbered companies and things, who also somehow, some way, through various means end up as donors to the Trudeau Foundation and the Liberal Party. Somehow, some way, when you put these puzzle pieces together, doesn't it all kind of seem like there was something underlying all of this in terms of money and political influence, that when narcotics are decriminalized, marijuana is legalized, it seems there is a criminal element just waiting to take advantage. And it seems to me like they might have had an inside track. Does it not look like that to you at all?
Well, here's what I have to have those questions in my mind. So what we know is I have enough people, some on the record, some off, saying after the marijuana was legalized across the country in 2018, this directly spurred Chinese state-sponsored or organized crime to take over that industry. They're now an exporter of Canadian weed around the world. And those very same cannabis brokerage kind of hubs that I've talked about, where they rent on, Verbo or whatever the app of the day is, and they're there for a month or two. And then to avoid the heat, they move these around. Again, these are Chinese state-sponsored operations, part of the United Front that's involved in CCP police stations, election interference, all kinds of operations in Canada, all kinds of operations which include tasking of trying to corrupt Canadian politicians. So do I know that, politicians can be lobbied to approve, Chinese financial entities that would allow money laundering and, visibility into dissident bank accounts? Cash for access stories about Justin Trudeau already suggest that, right? What else do we know? The Globe and Mail has reported, I reported in my own book based on pictures, that Justin Trudeau is constantly pictured with the same people that my sources indicate are running these cannabis brokerage operations and are like the handlers of Asian organized crime. From a political level, an intelligence level, are setting up these money laundering systems and narco systems in Canada. They're meeting. The Globe and Mail broke a good story, I give him credit for it, of Justin Trudeau being caught up in a surveillance operation with these very same people that I'm writing about, running the brokerage systems for the United Front in Vancouver. So why is Justin Trudeau meeting with them? We don't know. Maybe it was just tea and biscuits. Maybe it was like about approving a certain bank's license in Toronto, or like letting Anbane buy a major retirement home facility in Vancouver. We don't know. Could it have been in relationship to kind of like marijuana legalization or these other things you're talking about? The more narco side of it, less kind of the bank approval and, retirement home buyout. I don't know, but people should be asking those questions. They should be. Am I saying that I believe that certain Canadian politicians, lawyers have been enriched through through direct money laundering, through suspicious transactions going through their offices in Vancouver and Toronto from organized linked and United Front linked state actors? Yeah, I'm saying that. I'm saying that. I do believe so because I've seen documents suggesting that. Do I know how deep it goes, or if Justin Trudeau, has got money to build a villa in Costa Rica on the backs of this? No, I have no data to suggest that, but it's a valid question in my mind, and it's a valid question for you to be puzzling pieces together, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've had it. I mean, you and I have been talking for 2 years now, or a year and a half, and just through my conversations with you and the conversations I've had with Adam Zivo and reading Adam's work as well, a lot of it through the Bureau, um, I see this big picture coming together. And now, is it any surprise that the same people who were congregating around Justin Trudeau are now congregating around Mark Carney?
It's not surprising to me because that is the network of support for liberal elections. And not just the liberals, but the saturation and surrounding of liberal politicians is off the charts. But I want to stress that the United Front is extremely sophisticated, and they're into politicians in other parties too, for sure.
100%. Okay. In closing, and this is the final connection, the final puzzle piece to this conversation. You ran a story about the DEA being blocked from a carfentanil investigation in Toronto. Okay, let's close on that. Sam,
Yeah.
break it down for us. What happened?
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, when this came together, of course, I had questions in my mind for a long time. But look, just a horrific shooting on Danforth Avenue neighborhood in Toronto in 2018. Young Pakistani Canadian immigrant goes on a shooting rampage. 2 people are killed, something like 13 injured. And there are initial reports. ISIS takes credit for it, says this is the guy shot himself, in standoff with police. This was a soldier of the Islamic State. And so there's some low level, reports coming out. Maybe this could be terror linked, but very quickly, Toronto police and, Ralph Goodale, Justin Trudeau's then public safety minister, say, no, there's no national security links and nothing credible to link this to terrorism at all. Then, like, a little bit of news comes out that the guy's brother, in a suburban home in nearby Pickering, Ontario, just east of Toronto, had been in an overdose from handling a large quantity of carfentanil. News came out that the brother and a group of men from Pakistan were tied to 33 weapons seized there and 40 kilograms of carfentanil. Again, carfentanil is 100 times more powerful than fentanyl. So for anyone just on a fact basis looking at it, I believe at the time there was a few people going, could this be a weapon of mass destruction or what is it? People didn't even know that much about how dangerous just fentanyl trafficking is at that time. So, but generally the media reporting, from the Toronto Star, CBC, everyone was no terror link, not even much of a look at the carfentanil seizure itself. The family are kind of, they were in a mental health episode, right? Nothing, things happen. The story goes away. This is like years ago. So a very senior former DEA special operations investigator named Donald Im had read my book, like a number of great people in that sort of world in the United States, has been reading the Bureau, contacted me and said, you're just nailing so much that we at the DEA know a lot of it's classified and we haven't been able to say it. But he came to me and said, I want to tell you about this story. And, there are more stories to come. But the key thing here is the DEA was so concerned about that amount of carfentanil. They had seizures of carfentanil already in Atlanta area, linked to a dealer in Quebec that was convicted and extradited, or rather extradited and convicted. And so they asked the RCMP, can we have like a couple grams of that seizure to look at it to see if any of it ties into, what we have seized in the United States? The RCMP flat out said, no, we're handling it. We're investigating it. You can't do anything. But beyond that, the DEA were not convinced or did not believe the Canadian official explanation that this has nothing to do with terror networks. the DEA did their own investigation and found linkages back to Pakistan. And all that Donald Inwood told me, he said, you can ask me as much as you want. I'm only going to say so much. We found something of high concern. I pushed and pushed and pushed as a journalist, and he said, indirect links to terror networks, very concerning. That's all I can tell you. But again, this is why the DEA wanted more information from the RCMP and couldn't get it. And so, that in itself, shocking story, right? It just shows you whatever is reported in Canada. I mean, can you trust it? Can you believe what's coming out of Ottawa now? Well, we don't have all that much of a fentanyl problem. It's Washington is making this up.
Yeah,
right?
We should have said carfentanil. Maybe it was just the words that were used were incorrect.
I heard that might come up in that meeting with Mark Carney and President Trump. I don't know if it did or didn't. It should have, certainly. So, I mean, I think more to come. I'm reporting on more information from my colleagues in the United States who have deep concerns with Canada. But that story, this brings together the other aspect of it. Was they said, of course, the carfentanil and the containment equipment, they found, what little was shared with the DA from the local police, not the RCMP, showed food dyes that they believed could have been used in that fentanyl for more wide distribution around like youth buyers. And they're saying this is stuff that could only come from China, right? So that brings together a Pakistan threat network, we don't know, but potential terror links with Chinese state-sponsored, very obviously, factory. The pieces have to come from China. DEA is saying, Ottawa, let us work with you. Let us look at that. We see it as a threat to us too. Ottawa won't help. And again, it's the same story. I'm now hearing from multiple U.S. sources. It's not the RCMP officers, who are great. We have great police and intelligence officers in Canada. It's at the political level in Ottawa, minister level, commissioner level in the RCMP. That's the problem.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. What's really concerning is the politicization of our agencies and the fact that our closest ally, or former closest ally, or current, I don't know, depending on how you read that press conference, is making a simple request, right? Hey, we just need a little bit of this carfentanil to analyze to see if we can connect it to a seizure in the United States, and Canada refuses, and that's cause for concern because it's an indication of something bigger happening, right?
Yeah, it's huge cause for concern. Put yourself in their shoes in Washington. How do they read that? There's no good way to read that. What are you hiding? Or are you that uncooperative? You care that little about, our lives in America and your own lives in Canada, that you won't work together with a powerful agency that wants to save lives and has capacity to tell you, the RCMP, what Washington knows that is going on in Pakistan, maybe connected to this case, or in China, and Ottawa doesn't want to cooperate. Mm-hmm. There's no good way to read that.
Yeah, and I mean, or could it be just that upon further analysis, it will become evident to the DEA and the DOJ in the United States that Canada has a far bigger problem than it's letting on, and maybe that's
at a very, very basic level, I think that is highly probable. And could it go deeper into the sort of the corruption questions you were asking about? If I'm in Washington, I had to be asking those questions.
And I think that we're in this situation, Sam, in closing, because I know you got to run. I think we're in this situation where the walls are closing in, and these small, instances are leading to something much bigger. And I really think we're on the edge of something like life altering, because we have the same exact party in power after this election that were implicated in a number of, just to put it simply, like corrupt activities prior. So I feel like all of these, these small little instances of, uncooperative law enforcement agencies and intelligence agencies and the politicization of all of our agencies is leading to something that, never say never.
I mean, the conditions are there because bringing it back to the very first question you asked about how do you feel about the election, and it's a surreal feeling that we could be we had a joke of an election. Literally, it turned on who would, who would be able to best respond to trolling that stemmed from the American president having an extremely bad relationship and low view of Justin Trudeau, and our election just spun off into like crazy land based on, and who does that happen to except for a state that's kind of got banana republic, politics going on. And so yeah, when you say where bigger stuff could be on the horizon, yeah, that wobbliness is there. I agree.
Never say never, Sam Cooper. Well, my brother, I know you got to run, man. I don't want to hold you too long. So before you go, tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, go to thebureau.news, and it's growing well. It's doing well. It's almost 2 years now. It's almost 2 years, and it's every time I think about this, getting a little emotional now. During the winter, I posted on X. I was out there banging cross country skiing, and like it's like I'm really feeling this. I'm gonna do a selfie, and I'm like, I never would have imagined in my journalism career that I can nail 5 stories in 4 days and say, okay, I'm gonna go skiing and I'm gonna go train with my former JTF2 guy and do some hand to hand and. Yeah, that's my life now. For a lot of reasons, I'm just feeling blessed doing what I do. So go to thebureau.news and keep it growing.
Well, I will say this, my friend, it is well deserved. And I just really briefly, man. Okay, so as the Bureau grows, just so happens Brave New Normal grows too, because Sam and I do these often enough. I'm kind of piggybacking off his success. But I get people.
It's an ecosystem of podcasting.
I get people coming up to me in the street now, talking to me about Sam Cooper, my episodes with Sam Cooper, and what's really touching to me is that people recognize the risks you're taking. You know how many people I've had reach out to me personally, like, "Hey, does Sam Cooper have an armed guard? Like, does Sam Cooper have security? Like, we need to keep Sam Cooper going." Right. So it's really nice.
I got my former JTF2 friend and I got friends out there. Trust me, I got friends.
I know you do. And yeah, Sam is a fuck around and find out sort of situation. Sorry, Miss Cooper. But what's really nice is that people understand the risks that you're taking. And, as beautiful as it is to see the Bureau grow into what it's grown into, becoming a reference point for special forces DEA agents and the Pentagon in the United States. I mean, your reporting is top class, right? You are taking a huge risk, Sam, and you have dealt with just insane levels of harassment and threats as a consequence of what you're doing. So I'm taking the long way around, and I know you got to run. So people don't just sign up as a subscriber, sign up as a paid subscriber at thebureau.news, because Sam is taking insane risks doing what he's doing, like crazy risks and things that Sam doesn't talk about because he doesn't want to mar his journalism with his own personal private stuff that's going on. But Sam has endured a lot of harassment. I endure a lot of harassment every time me and Sam talk, and those people can go fuck themselves. Sorry, Miss Sam Cooper. This is never stopping. But, the stuff that I experience is, a grain of salt in a grain of sand in a beach of what Sam deals with. So sign up as a paid subscriber, thebureau.news. Follow Sam on X, Scooper at Scooper Cooper. I am a habitual refresher of his feed. And if you follow Sam, you will be too. It's always nice to talk to you, my brother. Should we circle back in a few weeks and continue on with these stories?
Yep, let's do it. We'll see you soon.
All right. Peace, bro.